The most dangerous mistake a leader can make is assuming the quietest person in the room has nothing left to teach. Nobody expected the meeting to become a lesson in humility. Not that morning. Not in the glass-walled executive conference room overlooking downtown Chicago. The city stretched beyond the windows in neat rows of steel and sunlight, while inside, a very different storm was beginning to form. Ethan Walker sat near the far end of the conference table, his notebook closed, his coffee untouched. At 42, he looked nothing like the polished executives surrounding him. No expensive watch, no tailored suit, just a simple blue button-down shirt and the calm expression of a man who had spent years solving problems nobody else even noticed. Across the room, Olivia Grant stood confidently beside a large presentation screen. The newly appointed CEO had been hired 6 months earlier to transform the company into something faster, younger, and more aggressive. Investors loved her. The board admired her. Employees respected her. But respect and understanding were not always the same thing. "We need fresh thinking," Olivia announced. "New strategies, new leadership, new expertise." Several department heads nodded immediately. Others avoided eye contact. Ethan remained silent. Olivia clicked the remote in her hand. A slide appeared behind her. 3 professional headshots filled the screen. Marcus Reed, Sophia Carter, Daniel Brooks. Industry stars, consultants, experts. The kind of people whose names appeared in business magazines and conference keynotes. Effective immediately, Olivia continued. These specialists will oversee the systems modernization project. A murmur moved through the room. Ethan glanced toward the screen, but said nothing. To avoid redundancy, Olivia added, "Mr. Walker's role in the initiative is being eliminated." Silence followed. Not the dramatic kind. The uncomfortable kind. Chairs shifted slightly. Pens stopped moving. A few employees lowered their eyes. Ethan had worked at Horizon Dynamics for nearly 16 years. Most people in the room couldn't remember the company without him. Olivia folded her hands confidently. "This decision is about efficiency, not individuals." Ethan slowly nodded once. "Understood." That was all he said. No argument. No protest. No bitterness. Just one quiet response. The simplicity of it seemed to surprise her. She had prepared for resistance. Instead, she received grace. Outside the conference room, sunlight reflected off neighboring skyscrapers. Inside, something far more important was happening. Marcus Reed stared at Ethan. Sophia Carter suddenly looked down at the table. Daniel Brooks appeared frozen in place. Olivia noticed the strange reaction immediately. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Nobody answered. Marcus shifted in his chair. Sophia tightened her grip on a pen. Daniel looked as though he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Ethan simply gathered his notebook. The room felt different now, heavier somehow. As he stood, Olivia offered a professional smile. "Thank you for your years of service, Ethan." "Of course," he replied. Then he picked up his coffee cup and quietly walked toward the door. Nobody stopped him. Nobody spoke. Yet as the door closed behind him, 3 of the most respected experts in the industry sat completely silent. Because the CEO believed she had just replaced an employee. What she didn't know was that she had just dismissed the man who taught every expert in that room everything they knew. Ethan Walker stepped out of Horizon Dynamics carrying nothing more than a notebook, a coffee mug, and a small cardboard box that looked almost empty. The afternoon wind swept through the streets of downtown Chicago, rattling loose leaves along the sidewalk and tugging at the corners of his jacket. Around him, thousands of people hurried between meetings, restaurants, and office towers. Nobody noticed the man leaving one of the city's most influential technology companies. And honestly, Ethan preferred it that way. He crossed the street, climbed into an aging silver pickup truck, and sat quietly behind the wheel for a moment. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then again. He glanced at the screen. 3 missed calls. Marcus Reed, Sophia Carter, Daniel Brooks. Ethan smiled faintly and turned the phone face down without answering. There would be time for conversations later. Right now, someone more important was waiting for him. 45 minutes later, he pulled into a quiet neighborhood on the western edge of the city. Small brick homes lined the streets. Children rode bicycles beneath maple trees. A basketball hoop stood over a cracked driveway across the road. It was not a wealthy neighborhood. It was not fashionable, but it was home. As Ethan stepped through the front door, a cheerful voice echoed from the kitchen. "Dad, In here, he answered. 16-year-old Lily Walker appeared carrying a mixing bowl covered in flour. Her blonde hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and a streak of flour stretched across her cheek. You are early, she said. Ethan looked at the clock. I guess I am. Lily studied him carefully. Something happened. It was not a question. Ethan laughed softly. You always know. I learned from the best. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan set down his box and smiled. I lost my job today. Most teenagers might have panicked. Lily did not. She simply nodded. Okay. Ethan asked. That is your response. She shrugged. You taught me something years ago. Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter. What was that? Lily poured cake batter into a pan. Never confuse a position with a purpose. The words landed softly in the room. Ethan recognized them immediately. He had said them to her after the death of her mother nearly 10 years earlier. Back when both of them were struggling to find their footing again. You remembered that? He asked. Lily smiled. I remember everything. Outside, sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, casting golden reflections across the worn hardwood floor. The smell of vanilla and cinnamon filled the air. For a brief moment, the pressure of the day seemed very far away. What nobody inside Horizon Dynamics knew was that Ethan's life had never revolved around job titles. Every Saturday morning for nearly 12 years, professionals from across the country traveled to learn from him. Engineers, executives, consultants, entrepreneurs. Some paid thousands of dollars to attend private workshops. Others waited months for an opportunity to sit in one of his leadership seminars. Ethan never advertised. He never posted online. He never chased attention. The people who found him usually arrived through a recommendation from someone whose career had been transformed by his guidance. That evening, as the sun began disappearing behind the rooftops, another call appeared on Ethan's phone. Marcus Reed, then Sophia, then Daniel, one after another. Ethan looked through the kitchen window and watched Lily place a homemade cake into the oven. The phone continued ringing. He already knew why they were calling. Because inside Horizon Dynamics, the experts had just realized something the new CEO had not. The company had not lost an employee. It had lost the one person who understood how everything truly worked. The next morning, Horizon Dynamics felt different. The building was still the same tower of glass and steel. The elevators still chimed. The coffee machines still hummed. Employees still hurried through the lobby carrying laptops and schedules. Yet something invisible had changed. Shortly after 8 o'clock, Olivia Grant entered the executive floor expecting progress. Instead, she found confusion. A dozen people were gathered around a conference table covered with reports, diagrams, and open laptops. Marcus Reed stood near the window, staring at a screen with a troubled expression. Sophia Carter was flipping through documentation. Daniel Brooks sat quietly, rubbing his forehead. Olivia stopped. What is going on? Marcus looked up. We are trying to locate the operational framework. The framework should be in the system. That is the problem, Sophia replied. The system references it, but the source architecture is missing. Olivia frowned. Then rebuild it. Daniel finally spoke. We cannot rebuild something we do not fully understand. The room fell silent again. Olivia crossed her arms. I thought all three of you were brought in because you understand these systems. Marcus exchanged a glance with Sophia. Neither seemed eager to answer. Olivia walked to the display screen. Charts filled the monitor. Timelines, process maps, workflow structures. Everything looked organized until someone tried to follow the connections. Then the gaps appeared. Hundreds of them. How is this possible? Olivia asked. Because the visible system is only the surface, Marcus said carefully. The deeper logic was never documented publicly. Who designed it? Olivia asked. Nobody answered immediately. Outside the windows, clouds drifted across the Chicago skyline. Inside the room, tension quietly gathered. Sophia closed a folder. The company has been using those frameworks for years. That does not answer my question. Sophia hesitated. No, it did not. Across the office, project managers began reporting delays. Teams requested clarification. Deadlines that had seemed simple suddenly became complicated. Processes that usually took minutes stretched into hours. Employees kept searching for information that somehow nobody could locate. By noon, Olivia's confidence had started to crack. Not publicly, not visibly, but privately, she felt the first signs of concern. She entered her office and reviewed performance reports. Again and again, one detail kept appearing. References to systems. References to methods. References to leadership models. Yet nowhere could she find the person originally responsible for creating them. Her phone buzzed. It was a board member. "How is the transition going?" Olivia forced a smile into her voice. "Everything is under control." But after the call ended, she looked through the glass wall of her office and noticed something unusual. Marcus was standing alone near the conference room. Not working, not speaking, just staring at Ethan's former desk. The desk was empty now. Clean, quiet, almost forgotten. Olivia stepped outside her office. "Marcus." He turned. "Yes. Tell me honestly, what is everyone so worried about?" Marcus looked toward the vacant desk again. His expression changed. Not fear, not frustration, something closer to respect. "Because," he said slowly, "most people think knowledge lives in documents." Olivia waited. Marcus continued. "But the best knowledge usually lives in people." He paused. Then he added quietly, "And the person who carried most of it walked out of this building yesterday." For the first time since becoming chief executive officer, Olivia Grant felt a question she could not easily answer begin to grow in the back of her mind. The following morning began with optimism that lasted exactly 23 minutes. At 9 o'clock, the executive conference room was filled again. Screens glowed. Reports were organized. Coffee cups lined the polished table. Olivia Grant entered determined to regain control of the situation. She believed that enough talent in one room could solve any problem. For a brief moment, she still believed that. "All right," she said, taking her seat. "Let us focus on solutions." Marcus Reed opened a presentation. "We spent most of the night reviewing the transition materials." Sophia Carter nodded. "And tracing the architecture behind the modernization framework." Daniel Brooks added. "We also interviewed team leads from 6 departments." Olivia leaned forward. "Good. What did you find?" Nobody answered immediately. Marcus clicked to the next slide. The screen displayed hundreds of interconnected diagrams. At first glance it looked impressive. Then the problem became obvious. Almost every major process connected back to a central methodology that nobody could fully explain. Olivia narrowed her eyes. "What am I looking at?" Sophia exhaled slowly. "The foundation of the company. And every critical system depends on principles that were never formally documented." Olivia frowned. "That makes no sense." Daniel folded his hands. "It makes perfect sense if the person who built it was available every day to explain it." Silence settled over the room again. Across the table, department managers exchanged uneasy looks. One of them finally spoke. "We have already delayed 2 client deliverables." Another added, "Customer support escalations increased by 17% since yesterday." A third manager cleared his throat. "Several teams are asking questions nobody can answer." Olivia felt pressure building behind her calm expression. "Then answer them." Marcus looked directly at her. "That is exactly the problem." He stood and walked toward the display screen. "Most organizations build systems." He pointed toward the diagram. Ethan built understanding. Another slide appeared. The room became even quieter. Olivia stared at the names listed across the screen. Senior managers, directors, consultants, industry leaders. Many were people she recognized immediately. Some worked at Fortune 500 companies. Others led successful firms of their own. "What is this?" she asked. Marcus hesitated before answering. "Former students." Olivia blinked. "Students?" Sophia nodded. "Over the last decade, hundreds of professionals studied under Ethan." "Consulting programs?" Olivia asked. "Leadership programs," Daniel replied. "Strategy programs. Systems thinking workshops. Problem-solving seminars." Olivia looked from one expert to another. "You are telling me he taught classes?" Marcus almost laughed. "No," his voice remained respectful. "We are telling you he taught us." The words seemed to drain the oxygen from the room. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Olivia slowly looked back at the screen. There were names she had admired for years. Names that appeared in business journals and keynote conferences. Names associated with innovation and success. "You attended his programs?" she asked quietly. "All of us," Sophia answered. "Every major breakthrough in my career started with something I learned from Ethan." Daniel nodded. "Mine too." Marcus folded his arms and stared out the window toward the Chicago skyline. The reason people respect him is not because he wants recognition. He paused. It is because he never needed it. Olivia sat perfectly still. For the first time, she was no longer questioning whether Ethan Walker was valuable. She was beginning to wonder how much of Horizon Dynamics had been standing on his shoulders without anyone realizing it. That evening, Olivia Grant remained in her office long after most employees had gone home. The executive floor had grown quiet. The constant ringing of phones had faded. The conference room stood empty behind glass walls reflecting the orange glow of the setting sun. Chicago stretched beyond the windows, beautiful and distant, while a single question refused to leave her mind. Who exactly had Ethan Walker been? She opened his personnel file, expecting answers. Instead, she found something stranger. The file was surprisingly ordinary. No impressive titles. No executive position. No public awards. No special recognition. 16 years of consistent work. Strong performance reviews. Dozens of successful projects. Yet almost nothing explained why 3 nationally respected experts seemed to regard him with such unusual respect. Olivia continued digging. Archived reports. Internal records. Old project summaries. The deeper she looked, the more unusual the pattern became. Ethan's name appeared everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Major initiatives succeeded under his guidance. Teams flourished around him. Employees who worked with him often earned promotions. Yet somehow he was rarely listed as the primary contributor. It was as if he had spent years helping others shine while quietly stepping out of the spotlight himself. The following morning, Olivia called another meeting. Marcus Reed arrived first. Sophia Carter followed. Daniel Brooks entered carrying a stack of folders. Olivia wasted no time. I want the truth. Marcus leaned back in his chair. About what? About Ethan. Nobody spoke immediately. Finally, Sophia looked across the table. Which part? Olivia blinked. What do you mean, which part? Sophia opened one of the folders. Inside were photographs taken over many years. Conference rooms. Training sessions. Leadership workshops. Executive retreats. Hundreds of professionals. Hundreds of faces. In photo after photo, Ethan appeared standing near a whiteboard or speaking to small groups. Never center stage. Never seeking attention. Just teaching. Olivia stared at the images. How many people attended these programs? Thousands, Daniel answered quietly. Across 12 years. Thousands. At least. Marcus folded his hands. Most of us did not come because of marketing. Then why did you come? Olivia asked. Marcus smiled faintly. Because someone we trusted told us there was a man who could explain complicated problems better than anyone they had ever met. Sophia nodded. The waiting list for his workshops was sometimes 6 months long. Olivia looked genuinely stunned. Then why was he working here? The question lingered in the room. Daniel was the one who answered. Because this company mattered to him. More than his own career? Olivia asked. Yes. Marcus stood and walked toward the window. Morning sunlight reflected across the skyline beyond. Most people chase recognition, he said. Ethan chased understanding. Sophia added quietly. He used to tell us something. Olivia looked up. What? Sophia smiled at the memory. If you build success for yourself, eventually it ends with you. If you build success for others, it keeps growing long after you are gone. Silence filled the room. Not awkward silence. Respectful silence. Olivia slowly looked down at another photograph. It showed a much younger Marcus Reed sitting in the front row of a workshop. Ethan stood beside a whiteboard covered in diagrams. Marcus noticed the photo and laughed softly. That was my first seminar. You learned all this from him? Olivia asked. Marcus shook his head. Not all of it. He paused before continuing. Just the parts that actually matter. For the first time since Ethan had left, Olivia felt something far heavier than concern. She felt regret. Because the more she learned about the man she had dismissed, the more impossible it became to ignore one painful truth. She had not removed a supporting piece from the company. She had unknowingly erased part of its foundation. 3 days later, the real crisis arrived. It did not begin with alarms or dramatic announcements. It began with a single email marked urgent. At 7:12 that morning, Horizon Dynamics received notice that its largest client, Northstar Logistics, would be conducting an immediate operational review. The contract was worth nearly $200 million over 5 years. Thousands of jobs depended on it. Investors watched it closely. Competitors wanted it desperately. And now the client wanted answers. By 8 o'clock, Every executive was in motion. Conference rooms filled. Phones rang continuously. Reports were requested faster than teams could produce them. Olivia Grant stood at the center of the storm, determined to prove the company was prepared. We have handled larger challenges then. This, she told the leadership team. Stay focused. Everyone nodded. Everyone agreed. But confidence became harder to maintain as the day unfolded. At 10 o'clock, the client requested a demonstration of the modernization framework. At 10:15, managers realized nobody could fully explain several critical decision pathways. At 11, the client asked why certain operational forecasts differed from historical performance data. No one had a complete answer. By noon, the atmosphere inside Horizon Dynamics had changed completely. Marcus Reed sat reviewing spreadsheets for the third time. Sophia Carter analyzed workflow structures. Daniel Brooks cross-checked projections against archived reports. Yet every solution seemed to lead back to another missing piece. Another unanswered question. Another gap. Olivia entered the conference room carrying fresh reports. Tell me we have something. Marcus looked exhausted. We have information. And not understanding. The words landed heavily. Outside the room, employees moved quickly through hallways carrying laptops and folders. Inside, the silence grew louder. Sophia pointed toward a diagram displayed on the screen. Look at this. Olivia stepped closer. What am I seeing? The operational model that North Star is evaluating. Then explain it. Sophia hesitated. Daniel looked away. Marcus folded his arms. Nobody spoke. Olivia stared at them. You are the experts. Marcus finally answered. And this model is still beyond anything we have seen. Olivia felt her stomach tighten. Why? Marcus took a slow breath. Because it was designed to teach people how to think, not simply what to do. Who designed systems like that? Olivia asked. The answer came immediately. Ethan. The room became quiet again. Not because anyone was surprised. Because everyone already knew it was true. Throughout the afternoon, the client continued asking deeper questions. Questions about scalability. Questions about leadership development. Questions about long-term adaptation. Every answer seemed connected to principles that Ethan had built into the organization years earlier. Principles everyone used. Principles few fully understood. By 5 o'clock, North Star's representatives ended the review with polite professionalism. They thanked the company for its time. They promised to deliver their assessment within 48 hours. Then they left. No smiles. No reassurance. No indication of what they were thinking. As the elevator doors closed behind the visitors, an uneasy stillness settled across the executive floor. Olivia returned to the conference room. The city lights were beginning to appear beyond the windows. Nobody spoke for several moments. Then Daniel broke the silence. If they walk away, the board will want answers. Sophia nodded slowly. Marcus looked toward Ethan's empty chair. And for the first time, he said quietly, we may not have them. Olivia followed his gaze. The chair remained empty. Yet somehow its absence felt larger than everyone else in the room combined. The next afternoon, Olivia Grant did something she had not done since becoming chief executive officer. She left the executive floor without an agenda, without a presentation, and without an answer. The North Star review still hung over the company like a storm cloud waiting to break. Employees worked quietly. Managers exchanged worried looks. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone felt it. Horizon Dynamics was drifting further from certainty with every passing hour. Olivia drove west through Chicago traffic, replaying conversations in her mind. Marcus, Sophia, Daniel. Every road seemed to lead back to the same person. Yet what troubled her most was not Ethan's knowledge. It was his character. The more she learned about him, the less she understood why someone with his influence had never demanded recognition. Late in the afternoon, she stopped at a small neighborhood bakery to grab coffee before returning to the office. The shop was warm and crowded, filled with the smell of cinnamon and fresh bread. Sunlight streamed through large front windows, painting golden squares across the wooden floor. Olivia waited in line, checking emails on her phone, when she heard a familiar name. My dad says that all the time. She glanced up. A teenage girl sat at a corner table with two classmates. Blonde ponytail. Bright eyes. Hey. Notebook covered in handwritten notes. Olivia recognized her immediately from a photograph she had seen in Ethan's personnel file. Lily Walker. What does he say? One of the girls asked. Lily smiled. That leadership is not about being the smartest person in the room. Then what is it about? Lily stirred her hot chocolate thoughtfully, helping other people become smarter. The conversation was simple, casual, yet Olivia felt herself stop listening to everything else around her. One of the boys at the table laughed. That sounds nice, but in business, everybody wants credit. Lily shook her head. Not my dad. Seriously? Seriously. She smiled again. He always says if you need everyone to know you are important, you probably are not focused on the right thing. Her friends chuckled softly. But Lily was not joking. Olivia could hear it in her voice. It was the voice of someone repeating lessons learned over years, not days. When Mom died, Lily continued quietly. Dad taught me something I will never forget. The table grew still. What? Her friend asked. Lily looked down for a moment. He told me that real strength is helping people without keeping score. The words settled gently into the room. No drama. No performance. Just truth. Olivia suddenly understood why so many people respected Ethan. Not because he was brilliant. Not because he could solve impossible problems. Those things mattered, but they were not the reason. People trusted him because his knowledge was connected to something deeper. Character. Grace. Humility. Lily gathered her books and stood. As she headed toward the door, Olivia stepped aside to let her pass. The teenager smiled politely without recognizing her. Then she disappeared into the afternoon sunlight. Olivia remained standing beside the window long after she was gone. For the first time since Ethan had left the company, the situation felt painfully clear. Horizon Dynamics was not suffering because it had lost expertise. It was suffering because it had lost the person who taught everyone else how to grow. And suddenly Olivia knew exactly what she needed to do next. The sun was beginning to set when Olivia Grant finally turned onto the quiet residential street where Ethan Walker lived. The neighborhood looked nothing like the world of executive boardrooms and investor meetings. Children played basketball in driveways. Porch lights flickered on one by one. The scent of freshly cut grass drifted through the evening air. Everything felt simple, honest, real. Olivia parked across the street and sat in her car for a moment, gathering the courage to do something she rarely had to do. Admit she had been wrong. Through the front window, she could see warm light spilling from Ethan's house. A shadow moved through the kitchen, then another. She took a deep breath and walked to the door. Before she could knock, it opened. Ethan stood there holding a dish towel. For a brief second, neither spoke. Olivia, he said calmly. Good evening. There was no anger in his voice. No bitterness. Somehow that made this harder. I hope I am not interrupting dinner, she said. Ethan glanced over his shoulder. You are about 30 seconds early. Olivia managed a small smile. That sounds like me. Ethan stepped aside. Come in. The house was modest, but welcoming. Family photographs lined the walls. A bookshelf filled one corner of the living room. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread drifted from the kitchen. Lily sat at the dining table finishing homework. She looked up and immediately recognized Olivia. You are the CEO, she said. Olivia nodded. I am. Lily smiled politely. Dad always says everybody deserves a second conversation. Ethan laughed softly. I really need to stop giving away all my best material. The tension eased slightly. A few minutes later, they sat around the kitchen table with glasses of iced tea. Outside, evening settled quietly across the neighborhood. Inside, Olivia finally spoke. I made a mistake. Ethan remained silent. Actually, she corrected herself, I made several. Ethan listened without interruption. I thought expertise was something you could hire, she continued. I thought titles and resumes told the whole story. She looked down briefly. I never took the time to understand what you had built. The kitchen grew still. The refrigerator hummed softly in the background. A clock ticked somewhere down the hallway. Ethan folded his hands. Most people see results, he said. Very few people look for roots. Olivia nodded slowly. The company needs you. Ethan smiled gently. The company does not need me. Olivia frowned. It absolutely does. No, Ethan said. It needs people who can learn, teach, and grow. That was always the goal. For a moment, she remembered Lily's words from the bakery. Helping other people become smarter. Suddenly, everything connected. The workshops, the students, the systems, the success of so many others. Ethan had never been building dependence. He had been building people. Then Olivia leaned forward. North Star's final review is tomorrow morning. Ethan's expression did not change. I know. How? Marcus called. Olivia almost laughed despite herself. Of course he had. Will you come back? She asked quietly. Ethan looked toward the family photographs on the wall, then toward Lily, then back at Olivia. His answer came calmly. I will come help. Relief flooded across her face. But before she could speak, Ethan added one more sentence. Not because I was right, because the people there deserve a chance to succeed. And in that moment, Olivia understood why so many leaders had once called him teacher. The next morning, the executive conference room was full before sunrise. Board members sat quietly along one side of the room. Department heads filled the remaining seats. The atmosphere felt different from every meeting that had come before. Nobody was talking about quarterly targets. Nobody was talking about promotions. They were waiting. At precisely 8 o'clock, the doors opened. Ethan Walker entered carrying the same notebook he had carried for years. No expensive briefcase. No dramatic entrance. Just a calm man walking into a room that suddenly seemed much quieter than before. Olivia Grant stood immediately. Thank you for coming. Ethan nodded politely. Let us help the client. Across the table, Marcus Reed smiled. Sophia Carter straightened in her chair. Daniel Brooks looked relieved for the first time in days. 30 minutes later, representatives from Northstar Logistics joined the meeting. Questions began almost immediately. Complex questions. Strategic questions. Questions that had frustrated the company for an entire week. Ethan listened carefully without interrupting. Then he walked to the whiteboard. The challenge is not the system, he said. The challenge is how the system is being interpreted. He drew 3 simple circles. Then a line. Then another. The room watched. What followed felt almost impossible. Problems that had seemed overwhelming began connecting together. Separate issues revealed a common cause. Confusion gave way to clarity. Every explanation was simple enough for everyone to understand, yet deep enough to solve the underlying problem. The Northstar representatives started taking notes. Then more notes. Then even more. Questions that once required long discussions received clear answers within minutes. For nearly 2 hours, Ethan guided the conversation with patience and precision. Not once did he criticize anyone. Not once did he mention what had happened the previous week. His focus remained entirely on helping others understand. When the final question was answered, silence settled over the room. One of the Northstar executives slowly closed his notebook. That, he said quietly, is the clearest explanation we have heard from any company in the industry. Several others nodded. The meeting concluded shortly afterward. Hands were shaken. Smiles returned. Optimism replaced anxiety. As the client representatives prepared to leave, their lead executive turned toward Olivia. Now we understand why your organization has been successful for so many years. After the doors closed, nobody moved. The room remained still. Then something unexpected happened. Marcus Reed stood up. Everything I know about leadership began with Ethan. Sophia Carter rose next. The most important lessons of my career came from him. Daniel Brooks stood as well. Mine too. One by one, managers around the room rose from their seats. Some had attended workshops. Others had been mentored directly. A few had simply learned by watching him work. The room became a quiet tribute to a man who had spent years building others instead of himself. Olivia felt emotion tighten in her throat. She stepped forward. I owe you an apology. Ethan smiled gently. You owe me nothing. I was wrong. We all get things wrong sometimes. Olivia looked around the room. Would you come back? Ethan glanced at the people standing before him. Then he looked toward the city skyline beyond the glass windows. I never really left, he said softly. Everything I taught is still here. No one spoke after that. They simply stood together in respectful silence. Because in the end, the greatest experts in the room were not the ones with the most impressive titles. They were the ones wise enough to remember who taught them. And for the first time since Ethan Walker had walked out of Horizon Dynamics, everyone finally understood that true greatness does not demand recognition. It creates it in others.